okay to listen to people in government, but don't automatically, regardless of who they are, give them the credibility that they're infallible and they're telling the truth and they're only doing it for the greatest good.
Right.
You know, you cannot assume that, and I think that is what was the downfall of Gasikevich.
And welcome back to Talking Racine. Oh, you should have been here an hour ago. Man, the conversation we've been having up in the kitchen here for the last...
Look out.
Yeah.
I hope we can replicate it.
Cut.
I hope we can replicate it for you guys. This is Mr. George Myers.
Morning.
Good friend of mine. And Jim Spodek, also a good friend. I'm Dr. Ken Jorgen, your host. And we're going to discuss the open records case, which involves Alderman Sandy Weidner and the City of Racine. And just, let's see, when did this come out here?
It's more the sealed records case.
Yeah. The secret case.
Nobody can find anything about it.
December 5th, yeah.
Right.
There's the date right there. Wisconsin Court of Appeals sent a, what would you even call this?
It's an order.
It's an order?
Yeah.
I like the sound of that. They sent an order back down to the judge.
Let it be known.
Eugene Gasikevich regarding the sealing of the case of Sandy Weidner versus the City of Racine, where she was actually suing for records.
Right, open records. She was asking for
She wanted
emails.
She wanted disclosure of
the emails that they used to send her to an ethics committee or a recommendation for.
It was an open records request that had been sealed, which is really, really unique.
It's
because
the case is weird.
It's like a contradiction in terms. How can you seal an open records
It's
request?
like, okay, show me what you got. No, we can't do that.
I think they call those things
Secret.
oxymorons.
Yeah.
A secret open records request.
But he did. The Court of Appeals came back, did not make a decision, but they basically came back with an order to the judge saying, you can read it if you want.
It appears to this court that the circuit court's order sealing the entire record is, at the very least, broader than necessary to protect the interest at stake, given the presumption of openness in public records.
And that's a very important, those last couple words there.
Yep.
The presumption of openness in public record. That's a very good policy. I wish the government would follow it more often, but at least it's that way in law.
Yeah, but that phrase, at the very least, broader than necessary.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's at the least.
Which is saying you overstepped even worse than this. This is bad enough, but you did a worse job.
And the order is, it's further ordered that the matter is the circuit court with directions to determine which specific documents in the circuit court record should be sealed from public view, if any.
If any, right. That's another one of those little phrases.
Yeah, if any. So what the circuit court is basically saying is like you're handing in your homework and the teacher says, you might want to re-look this over before we grade this.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, because I think
you want to check out some of
did you ever have that happen to you?
that was my life. But
so you're familiar with that
I always
phrase.
went over the top anyway, so it never mattered. But what I think the circuit court is saying, listen, Judge, we don't want to drop the hammer on you publicly, but we will give you the opportunity to correct this. And I think now that there are going to be some discussions with the attorneys involved to come to some conclusion. It may not be. Now, I know that the city is still they're still pushing that we feel we were right and this information should be sealed.
Well, yeah, I think what the court is saying is, Judge, take a look at what you've done. Are you sure you want to do it like this?
Yeah.
Give it some thought and, get back to us. We aren't going to render a decision on this. It needs some further thought on your part. And what we're all convinced of, I think we're all in agreement, right, is that the city attorney was assigned way more credibility than he deserved by Judge Gasikevich's court.
I think that is the core of the problem. The judge just gave too much confidence and credibility, like you say, in the city attorney.
And I can
the city
understand
attorney
that.
was doing it for political reasons. They're trying to do all this, crush this Sandy Weidner business, and boy, when that gets into the legal actions, that's a lousy way to come to a legal decision. Is a political goal.
Well, there's an implied trust
That's right.
in the judge for the city attorney, which I think typically is warranted, when you consider the positions that they're in. But you have to not just consider the positions, you have to consider the people that occupy them. And I think the judge in this situation afforded more credibility to that office and the person who holds that office than was warranted.
Well,
and
yeah,
that's kind of what the circuit or the appeals court is saying.
And I agree with what you say there. My concern is that some people, and Judge Gaskevich may be one of them. I don't know for certain, but they put if you're in government, you're good. You're trying to do the right thing. I've heard that of police officers. Despite all the evidence of the contrary, if you're a cop, thank a cop type of thing. Well, wait a minute. These are just people, and some of them aren't to be that trusted, even though they wear the same uniform as those that are to be trusted. So you kind of have to. You might have a general.
Duty.
Huh?
That's the judge's duty.
Yeah.
is to
In other
look
words,
through that.
it's okay to listen to people in government, but don't automatically, regardless of who they are, give them the credibility that they're infallible and they're telling the truth and they're only doing it for the greatest good.
Right.
You cannot assume that, and I think that is what was the downfall of Gaskevich.
Was he lazy? Was it just one of those things that's like, looks good?
Let's not throw any inference there.
I know.
He might be. He could be very busy. I mean, that's a very good possibility.
Well, no, I think we can go there. I think the fact that
Okay.
You got the city, you got the city attorney coming in with a high-priced lawyer, coming in saying, Judge, I mean, this older person is causing a heck of a lot of problems for us. She's disseminating information that shouldn't be given to the public, and we feel this information needs to be curtailed. And now she's asking for this information as to why I personally, or that we've asked the ethics committee to review her actions.
No, what you just said there is gospel is where the error is.
Right.
It's fine to listen to something like that from a city attorney, but to take it as gospel is a big fat error. It has to be challenged, questioned, investigated,
and where I'm going
and looked
is,
at.
it went to the appeals court, and the appeals court hasn't made a decision, but they came back and said, Judge, I want you to
take
look at
another
this
look.
again.
Yeah.
So somebody dropped the ball here.
Well, I think that the cumulative performance of the people who hold a particular office is what gives credibility to that office. The mere being in that office is not what should give credibility to the person, and I think
that's
what
exactly
happened
right.
here.
Yeah, if other people in government would follow that thought right there, we'd be a lot better off.
Well,
It's not like I'm the
because
damn
you're-
city attorney. It's like,
Right.
well, no, it's like,
You're still a person. You're
Right.
holding a city attorney's position, and we still have to look at that questions of power. Man, let us hear no more of confidence in man. Remember that that way.
Yeah.
But bind him down from mischief with the kind of changes of the Constitution. In questions of power, then, let us hear no more of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief with the chains of the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson. The thing is that in questions of power, let's not hear no more confidence of man. You have to look at him, you have to question it, and you have to look at it.
This is the
and
basis
make
of
a
our
decision, I
judicial
think.
system, is to make those decisions and hold that to what is law. And I'm afraid, I think today we're seeing a lot of, we see politics in a lot of things in elections, but I think it's happening in our judicial system. I think these
I think the
elections
judicial is getting much too political.
much too political.
you're absolutely right.
That's
It's not based on law anymore. It's
to go
based
down.
on politics and
Absolutely.
personality.
Yeah.
And now
No.
they're getting into these campaigns, and that's a whole other subject, but we can move on from that. But
Yeah, where we wanted to go with this, and as the producer, I think you did a good job of selecting this particular topic. We want to relate this case that Sandy Weidner is going through right now, which is this closed open records case. We want to equate what's going on there with something that happened previously in the city, and that is the case of Bill Bielefeld against John Dickert. That goes back to 2011, I think, is when it was originated, right?
right.
And you may or may not remember that there was a situation where Mayor Dickert was on a radio program with two other candidates for the office of mayor. I mean, it was clearly a discussion among candidates.
Right.
And he made a remark about a former city employee, which the city employee took as slanderous, and in fact sued Mayor Dickert in court for what he had done. He says, you're the mayor, and you said this about me. What does that? What does that do to my reputation in the city,
Right.
basically? So, City Attorney Scott Letney took it up on behalf of Mayor Dickert to defend him and say that he deserved to be indemnified by the taxpayers of the City of Racine for all of his costs incurred and any potential costs incurred in that lawsuit. So he argued on behalf of the mayor. And now we've got a situation where Letney himself has created a court case where Sandy Weidner is involved, and she has got some serious expenses that she has personally borne herself. And it was done in the process of, or in her duties as a alderman.
Correct.
So what we're saying is that we covered Mayor Dickert's expenses, his legal expenses. Now we're going to be on the hook for Sandy Weidner's expenses, and more justifiably so than we were for Mayor Dickert's.
So I want to kind of
so
go
let's
back.
get into that discussion.
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit further on when that case now where Dickert sued the City of Racine, saying, I've got this ex-employee or employee that's suing me for slander. The bill, I'm going to say, is roughly let's just say $100,000. I want the city to pay this because I was acting as mayor. That court case went. There was a court case filed. There was a motion to dismiss by Dickert's attorney or the city, or I guess Dickert's attorney was hired by the city at that point. Dickert was already being represented by the city, and if it finds that Dickert was working in his personal capacity, Dickert would be responsible for his legal fees. It went to court, and it was to Kenosha court. It went to Judge Schroeder in Kenosha on a motion to dismiss the case because they felt it was frivolous or whatever, and they said that he was working in his mayoral
Official
capacity,
yeah.
and that they didn't file the prep time frame, and it was out of jurisdiction, different things.
A technicality, just a
Basically,
technicality.
the judge said no. This is the Bielefeld case is that he was in his personal capacity, and that that should not be dismissed. So that case was ongoing at this point. Now, when we get to the Common Council, when now all of a sudden Letney's like, okay, the court is going to take it to, it's going to go to court, it's going to go to a jury, and then that decision will be made. Prior to that, Letney goes to the city council and says, we have to answer to the court, or we have to answer to the other side, which is Bielefeld side. Is he indemnified through the city, or is he going to be paid on his personal?
Yeah, the question was if he was acting as mayor, then he would
Right.
be indemnified. We would have to cover his expenses.
So
If he was acting as an individual citizen, then he would not be indemnified by us, and he would be liable for the court expenses and
now,
the
one
attorney expenses.
one thing I want to just put in people's minds before that: did that have to actually come from the Common Council? Did they have to say, "Oh, we're going to cover his costs because he was mayor at all"? It really wasn't up to the Common Council anymore. It was up to the courts as to where it was. But Letney, the attorney, said we have to have an answer. So this is where, in 2011, Letney goes in front of the Common Council to explain to the Common Council the requirements to pay for legal fees for an attorney.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
for the attorney for Dickert's
the
case.
requirements of a city to pay the attorney fees for a city employee.
Correct.
And what other choices that the council has? Do they have to pay it or not have to pay it?
Right.
And that's what.
No, you've got a
I'm going to cut.
clip there that
Yeah,
you're
we're going to
gonna
make a
cut
few cuts into this.
Yeah, we're good.
And we'll kind of just comment on it as we go.
Okay.
Absolute liability. This is not something the city can decide, we don't care, we're not going to do it. If these are acts committed while carrying out his or her duties, the mayor's duties, then the city has absolute liability, absolutely required to, there's no option.
What we want to do here is draw a comparison between what we anticipate is going to be a Alderman Weidner claim against the city to pay her legal expenses, which we think is justified, as opposed to the legal expenses which Attorney Scott Letney is advocating for being paid on behalf of Mayor John Dickert. And he's quoting a Bean versus Sturgeon Bay case in Wisconsin from 1983. And it states, absolute liability is imposed on a city if the officer is sued in his or her official capacity or as an individual because of acts committed while carrying out his or her duties. Well, I think it's pretty clear that Alderman Weidner was performing or carrying out his or her duties as an alderperson in informing the citizens, providing information that they had requested.
She was getting information from sources, which happened to be the city attorney, and she was passing it on to her constituency or other people in the community at their request.
Complying with the open government mandate that exists
which
in the United States.
Well within the realm of what an alderman should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all city business, and she was doing all and only city business.
Now let's flash back real quickly to the situation that John Dickert was involved in, for which he was being sued. He was on a radio program. He was, at that time, running for re-election, and there were 2 other mayoral candidates on the program with him. In my estimation, and I think you guys agree with me, that entire program was part of campaigning. Now Litany dissected it apart and said, well, no, this was a campaign discussion, and this was city issues. No, anytime you've got like 3 candidates for an office there, I think it was basically all campaigning.
Yeah.
But whether or not it was, that is a weaker case than the case that Alderman Weidner is going to have, and he was a strong advocate for Mayor Dickert's legal expenses being paid. Well, the attorney Letney went to great extremes to try and parse them things out and say, well, this was campaigning.
Right. Well, there was he talked about the snow plowing of the city streets here, but then he talked to,
he had a minute by minute thing.
Broke it down minute by minute. I mean, and this is
we think it's BS.
Well, it certainly is a stretch. You're taking that and you're to cover
But
Dickert.
The point is that, he's covering Dickert for what we think is a stretch, and we anticipate that he's going to argue
suddenly
against.
Close that door when it comes to Sandy
He goes
Weidner.
completely the other direction with Alderman Weidner.
He quotes another case. Why don't you bring that one up and let's watch that.
It includes those acts that are so closely connected with what the person is employed to do that they are methods of carrying out the objectives of the employment. So again, I think as you're looking at this, the 2 things that you really need to look at to decide whether it was in the scope of duties is whether there was a motivation in any part, in any way, to serve the city, and whether this is any method of carrying out the objectives of the employment.
Now, see, that's interesting. And this is another case, this is from 1990 in Wisconsin. If to any appreciable extent the motivation is to serve the employer, then the determination is that the person is serving the employer. Well, what does it mean? What does it mean to serve?
Oh.
Well, let's clarify that. It means providing something of value without expectation of a return. In other words, you're doing something on behalf of your employer. Now, clearly, if he's asking for indemnification, which is to cover his legal expenses, he's asking something for in return for what he did and what he said. Now, what he provided resulted in a slander suit. So how could that be considered something of value?
Yeah, right.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
And they covered it, though. They covered it. They covered his fees, even though what value did Dickert bring to the community with the fact that he slandered an employee or potentially slandered an employee?
Right. Regardless of any way you define it, the point is that Letney went to great extent to make it look like this law protected someone from Dickert and doing this slanderous act on a radio program, and that was part of his job.
Yeah.
And in turn, we came to Alderman Weidner, who is asking for records from within the city on her behalf, basically asking, hey, I'd like to have these records. I'm an alderperson. I'm a representative of taxpayers. I'm asking for these records. Oh, we can't give them to you. Well, her alternative was to do a mandamus to say, I'm forcing you to give me these records. I mean, how much clearer does that get to what Dickert did?
Yeah, she was obviously acting in capacity as alderman when she was using those records, and now they're being used against her, so she wants to get copies of them. I mean, all this is very directly related to her activities as an alderman.
But what happens here is, now this is where the twist, the triangle comes in. Letney hires an attorney, outside firm, to represent himself, really.
Yeah.
Not so much
Yeah.
the city. He's
Yeah.
representing. He says he's representing the city, but really it's representing himself. To not to have these emails released because there may be some damaging information in these emails that could affect
Him personally.
him personally.
Yeah.
I think that's because what you mentioned there was why would a city attorney like Scott Letney need an attorney on a open records request?
Yeah.
Why couldn't you just sit down in a room and say, okay, what do we got here? I have a problem with this. You have a problem with this. Let's work it out. And under the Court of Appeals decision, and I believe
The court certainly agreed with our
Yeah.
side of the
Yeah.
story.
Absolutely.
What are you doing withholding these records? They're saying, if not all of them, at least some of them, are obviously not of private concern.
at very least, broader than necessary to protect the interests at stake, given the presumption of openness in public records.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I
this is going to get more interesting
Oh, yeah.
as time goes on.
Yeah.
It really will.
But to go back to 2011 and look at what to what great lengths to get Dickert's legal fees paid.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
he was jumping through flaming hoops to get
Right.
Dickert's
and
legal
even
expenses
at that
covered.
time that the alder persons on there were actually questioning it. And I know that Marcus came up with he was going to do a PowerPoint, and I couldn't find that part. But there were some actual questions. Was he really campaigning?
I would have, Eric Marcus had
totally
some-
different
yeah.
alderman on that council at that time. That even at that time I thought they were weak. They're much weaker today.
No,
my
no,
opinion.
that was a very unusual, to go back to that period of time and watch those aldermen discussing things and see who was in those chairs then and who's in those chairs now. It's quite a change.
They did pay for John Dickert's legal fees. It was well over $100,000, and of course, we paid $100,000. The insurance picked up the rest. Very similar to, and then when the Racine Journal-Times asked for the amount of legal fees that were paid, they told them it was confidential and we couldn't give you that amount because people were concerned at that time about how much were we spending to protect John Dickert from a lawsuit.
But Jim, it's time. You're bringing up a broader issue now. But the thing is that is the type of thing that we just got to get more openness in government. This whole thing of keeping information from the public that they have a right to know and should know about is just getting beyond the pale now. It's time to start seeing some changes in that regard. We need honest, open.
It's got to be open and transparent,
Yeah.
and if it's honest. There's no problem with it being open and transparent.
Right.
I mean, I think that honest part it falls into the transparency part.
Yeah.
If I'm not honest, I certainly don't want to be
You
transparent.
can't be open and transparent. That's right.
Yep. And now
and
today,
it's time to start just demanding that.
Absolutely.
This is but you can see how long it's been going on a simple thing.
This is 2011. This goes.
Yeah,
back
that's what I say. On a simple thing like the cost of attorney's fees. How private is that? It's one thing to be talking about somebody's medical records or something like that, but the attorney's fees that the city paid on a particular case is private.
it's sealed, George.
Yeah.
In this case, in the
Secret?
Weidner case, it's sealed.
Yeah.
We can't do it because it's all sealed.
No, that we've really gone beyond the pale. and
We
it's
really
time
have
get
gotten
that
to a
straightened out.
point now where I do believe the city attorney should be asked to resign.
I think he's shown his.
You think asking is the way to do it, or
Well, I think
or
if
is it time to demand?
Well, I think you demand his resignation. Now, I think, but we also need a leadership in the community, especially on a common council and from the mayor, to ask for that. What's happening here is a
Why is the
violation.
council and the mayor watching the bus run over Alderman Weidner?
Well, not only that, help
They're
back up over, but the whole fact here is, even if it wasn't Alderman Weidner, it's the whole idea
Yeah.
of open government.
I
And
think that's
that
the
is
thing
really-
with Letney.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say he's incompetent as a lawyer or finding legal things or interpreting legal things, but this
Who
whole thing
is
of
he
keeping it all
protecting?
secret is just
Yeah.
that's time to.
It goes against the
needs some
grain of
change.
democracy and what this
That is
counter
very true.
against
Yeah.
the Constitution, basically.
Yeah, if you're talking about democracy, which comes from demo, which means people. It's a people-oriented type of government, by darn, if it's going to be people oriented, it's got to be available to the people.
To the people.
Now,
Absolutely.
isn't that
to
a
do
Greek
the
word? That's a Greek word, right? I mean, and demo is people, and crazy, is that just like a different spelling for crazy? I mean, does it mean like
No,
the people are crazy,
no,
or what?
Crazy to keep crazy to keep.
I have to look up what that means.
But I'll tell you,
you have oligarchy and very others ocracies,
Yeah,
that probably has
but I
something
think
to
we
do with
have
government.
reached a point where there needs to be a real look at this city attorney, that whole department. I mean, we've called on that before, but now I think when we come back and we look
And
at
I don't
this,
want to just pick on Scott Ledney,
Right.
but if he does come to the fore, there's some other people in government also are
Absolutely.
hiding things, and it's time.
And we'll be talking about them.
Yeah. And as
More
this,
in
and
this
Scott
this
world.
Ledney is maybe at the head of the line
Yeah.
right now, but
well, I mean,
it's just
the other
it's going
attorney
way
in
too
that
far.
office has moved on. That was
Nicole
the
Larson,
assistant.
yeah.
Yeah, Nicole Larson, the assistant attorney's moved on. I mean, there's some real problems there, and I mean, if it's for personal protection, if this is what the city tax dollars are being used for, I've got a real problem with that.
Oh, yeah, huge problem.
You know.
Well, I hope it's been a good Monday for you. This has been a good discussion, I think. I think this is a very, very important issue, and it's going to unfold even more in the days ahead. And like you said, it's not just Scott Ledney. There's other people in city government that we're going to explore. We'll be talking about them. You come by and join the discussion because it's your government, it's your city. You need to be involved. You need to care about it. And
we want to help you know more about it, so you can
yeah,
care about it.
absolutely, absolutely. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week.